Something changed in the Persian Gulf 3 weeks ago, and most people still don't fully understand what. It wasn't just another deployment. It wasn't a press conference. It wasn't a tweet from the Oval Office. It was a ship moving through the Indian Ocean with the kind of quiet that only means one thing. Over 2,000 Marines, F-35B stealth fighters, amphibious assault capability, and behind it all, one of the most expensive and lethal missile defense systems ever built, pulled directly from the Korean peninsula, leaving Seoul nervous, and repositioned near the Iranian coast. This is not a patrol. This is a message, and the message has teeth. The USS Tripoli is en route to the Strait of Hormuz, and if you're not paying attention to what that actually means, you should start. Let's go back to February 28th. That's when this war started. A joint U.S. Israeli operation targeting Iranian military infrastructure. The world didn't fully know what it was looking at. Some called it a limited strike. Some called it a warning. The Iranian regime called it an act of war and responded accordingly. First came the attacks on American bases in neighboring countries. Not symbolic attacks, real ones, calculated, coordinated. Then came something the world hadn't seen in decades. Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz. Not to everyone. That would be strategically stupid. They closed it selectively, specifically to American and Israeli vessels. It was provocation dressed as policy. And it worked, at least in the short term. Shipping companies panicked. Oil prices spiked. Iran's government spokesperson stood in front of cameras and said, without blinking, "Prepare for oil at $200 a barrel, because you destabilize the region that keeps the world's lights on." That line landed. Oil markets flinched, and in Washington, the pressure started building immediately. Because here's what the Strait of Hormuz actually represents, and this part matters. Roughly 20% of the world's oil supply passes through that narrow stretch of water. Not 20% of Iranian oil, 20% of global oil. The Persian Gulf's output feeds refineries in Asia, Europe, and the Americas. When that strait gets restricted, the effects don't stay in the Middle East. They show up in gas prices in Ohio, in shipping costs in Rotterdam, in inflation numbers that politicians everywhere have to answer for. Iran knew this. They've always known this. The Strait of Hormuz has been Iran's most reliable leverage point for decades. Every time Washington pushes too hard, Tehran points at that choke point and reminds the world what it can do. And for a long time, that threat was enough to keep things from escalating past a certain threshold. That threshold has now been crossed, and the USS Tripoli crossing the Indian Ocean is the answer. So, what exactly is the Tripoli? On paper, it's an amphibious assault ship, America class, about 844 feet long, roughly 45,000 tons, fast for its size. But calling the Tripoli just a ship is like calling a loaded aircraft carrier just a boat. What the Tripoli is, functionally, is a mobile military base that floats. It carries the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, one of the most capable rapid response forces in the U.S. military. Around 2,200 Marines and Navy sailors trained specifically for amphibious operations. That means operations that start at sea and end on land. You cross the water, you take the beach, you push inland if you have to. That's not a defensive posture. That's an offensive capability, and that's before you account for the aircraft. The F-35B variant is a short takeoff, vertical landing stealth fighter. It can operate from a ship like the Tripoli without a traditional runway. It's designed to avoid radar detection, deliver precision strikes, disable air defense systems, and destroy hardened targets. If you want to take out anti-ship missile batteries on a coastline, the F-35B is exactly what you use. If you want to clear the way for a naval convoy through a contested strait, the F-35B is what goes in first. The aircraft doesn't just protect the ship. It projects power far beyond the ship's position. Now add the THAAD system to this picture, and this is where things get genuinely significant. Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. The U.S. operates only 8 of these systems worldwide. Each battery costs approximately $1 billion. They're not deployed carelessly. THAAD is engineered to intercept ballistic missiles in their final descent phase, the kind of missiles Iran has been launching in volume since this conflict started. According to reporting from the New York Times, Iran has fired more than 500 ballistic missiles since February 28th. 500. In under 3 weeks. That's not a warning. That's an attrition campaign. And American missile defense infrastructure in the region has been absorbing it, but not without cost. Reports surfaced in early March that a THAAD radar system in Jordan was destroyed during one of those exchanges. The system was degraded. Washington noticed, pulling a THAAD battery from South Korea is not a casual decision. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung said publicly he was opposed to it. He acknowledged, pointedly, that the decision wasn't his to make. Seoul now sits with reduced coverage against whatever Pyongyang might decide to do, while Washington's attention is focused elsewhere. That's a real risk that Washington accepted. That tells you something about how seriously the Pentagon is taking the missile threat from Iran. You don't accept risk in one theater to cover another theater unless the second theater is genuinely critical. Let me be precise about what we know and what remains uncertain, because this is one of those situations where the line between fact and speculation matters a great deal. What's confirmed? The USS Tripoli and the 31st MEU are moving through the Indian Ocean toward the Middle East. The THAAD redeployment from South Korea has been reported by multiple credible outlets, including The Washington Post and Gulf News. The Karg Island raid on March 13th, in which U.S. Air Force assets struck more than 90 Iranian military targets on the island, is documented by CENTCOM and reported by Al Jazeera, Reuters, and others. Iran's oil exports from the island reportedly continued despite the strikes, though the military infrastructure on the island was significantly degraded. What's disputed or unclear? Whether F-35Bs are actually aboard the Tripoli right now, whether the ship will be used for escort operations only or for something more aggressive, and whether Trump's stated consideration of winding down the conflict reflects genuine strategic intent or is political positioning. What analysts are reading into it? The pattern. The island of Karg sits roughly 25 miles off Iran's Persian Gulf coast. It handles approximately 90% of Iran's crude oil exports. If you want to understand why that number matters, consider this. Iran's military machine, the missiles, the drones, the proxy forces in Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen, runs on oil revenue. Remove that revenue, even partially, and the clock starts ticking. Not on the Iranian people, on the regime's ability to fund a sustained military campaign. Mohammed Soleiman, a researcher at the Middle East Institute, has described Karg as a potential economic choke point that cuts both ways. Iran has been throttling global oil supply through the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S., if it chooses, can throttle Iranian oil revenue through Karg. The symmetry is not accidental. When Trump was asked directly whether the U.S. would go further against Karg's oil infrastructure, his response was characteristically opaque. It's not at the top of the list, but it's one of many options, and I can change my mind in seconds. That's not a denial. It's a door left open. The Pentagon, when pressed by the New York Post for clearer intentions, offered the standard operational security line. We don't discuss future movements or hypothetical operations. Also, not a denial. Also, a door left open. The broader picture is this. The United States has now deployed more than 50,000 troops to the region. 2 carrier strike groups, the USS Gerald R. Ford and the USS Abraham Lincoln, have already participated in strikes against Iran. The Tripoli group joins that structure. On top of that, Secretary of the Army Dan Driscoll confirmed that 10,000 drone interceptors have been deployed to protect American bases throughout the Middle East. This is not a limited engagement anymore. This has the physical infrastructure of something larger. And yet Trump, as recently as March 20th, was publicly discussing the possibility of winding down operations. He mentioned lifting sanctions on Iranian oil stranded at sea, a move that would potentially ease the energy crisis while reducing pressure on the regime. The contradictions are real. Sending 2,000 Marines toward a potential ground operation while simultaneously discussing de-escalation isn't a communications failure, it's leverage. You negotiate from strength, or you don't negotiate at all. Iran is watching this. The IRGC knows the Tripoli is coming. Iranian state media knows. The regime's military planners have been tracking the satellite imagery the same way open-source analysts have. And they have choices to make that are no less difficult than Washington's. Here's where we actually are. Stripped of the noise, a war that started less than a month ago has already produced more ballistic missile exchanges than most modern conflicts accumulate over years. A strategic island has been struck from the air. The world's most critical oil transit corridor has been partially closed. A missile defense system has been shuffled across theaters. An amphibious assault ship is crossing the Indian Ocean. And oil economists are no longer laughing at the idea of a $150 barrel. Some are no longer laughing at $200. What happens when the Tripoli arrives depends on decisions that haven't been made yet, or at least haven't been announced. The Pentagon won't say. The White House is sending conflicting signals by design. Iran is escalating where it can while watching what approaches from the east. The Strait of Hormuz has been a pressure point for decades. What's different now is that the pressure has moved from rhetoric to hardware, from threats to deployments, from warnings to an America-class assault ship with 2,000 Marines and stealth fighters heading toward the most contested 21 miles of water on the planet. The last time something this significant moved through the Indian Ocean toward that region, it changed the Middle East for a generation. What this one changes, we're about to find out. If you think this ends quietly, ask yourself this: when has it ever? Drop your read on this in the comments. Are we looking at escort operations, a cargo seizure, or something we haven't even seen yet? The people paying attention right now are going to understand the next 6 months before they happen.